Every artist I know, myself included, tends to start things and leave them unfinished. As an artist, scrapping artwork is just part of the trade. Everyone does it. And in reality, I don't think there's any obligation for an artist to complete an artwork. And it's up to the artist to determine what completed means to them and whether or not they choose to deem a piece as such. However, I do believe that not finishing what you start can become a problem if your goal is to actually produce completed artworks, especially if at this point you have countless pages or files of work in progress pieces you've started on but eventually dropped for some reason. I get it though. Sometimes you really don't know where to take a painting, so you leave it where it's at to work on another idea you may have. Maybe in hopes that you'll return to it another time. Or maybe you just hate what you've created and you wouldn't want to spend any more time trying to improve it. It's also possible that you just have a hard time focusing on actually finishing your art and would rather work on new ideas. Whatever the case, in this video, my goal is to help you break the loop of constantly starting pieces but never finishing them. I want to explain how finishing more of your art can actually make you a better artist, and also give my advice on how not to scrap your next painting. So first off, how can finishing your art make you a better artist? I have a few reasons why. The first thing to note is that the ability to finish art is actually a skill. Being able to bring a painting from just an idea all the way to its final stages and complete it is something that requires you to actually practice by going through each stage of the process. You won't be able to develop the skill of finishing an artwork if you're constantly scrapping what you start. So even if you don't really like what you've started, I still think it's important to bring it to some level of completion. And in most cases, you don't even need to spend a whole lot of time doing that. Additionally, by completing artworks from start to finish, you'll start to find your own process. And this leads to my next point. Creating art usually requires you to follow a series of steps before you arrive at a finished product. And we refer to this as the process or your workflow. Having a solid workflow that you've done many times and you're comfortable with can really help make you more prolific as an artist. Sitting down and completing art will actually be less of a struggle once you find your own workflow. However, it's hard to even know what your own process is or what workflow works best for you if you rarely finish the things you start. I remember when I used to struggle finishing anything. I reached a point where I would only finish like 3 paintings a year. And what would happen with me is that at a certain stage of each painting, I just had no idea what to do next. And the few paintings I did finish took me forever to complete because I didn't really have a workflow. So I resorted to guessing what to do next at each stage of the painting. And I realized that having a process ingrained in you takes away a lot of the guesswork of creating a piece of art and allows you to work more freely. So you should start finishing your drawings to help you develop your own personal workflow. And to mention one more point on why completing your art will make you a better artist, finishing a piece will give you more experience and confidence to finish your next one. To put it simply, by going through the entire process, start to finish, you can reflect on what problems you might have ran into while working on the piece or what you would have liked to do differently, and apply this new information to your next painting. Taking the time to reflect on what you created, as well as your process of creating it, is a valuable thing to do. Okay, so now that I've explained why finishing art is important, how do you actually stop scrapping your art? Well, what I suggest is that for your next artwork, one thing you can do to make sure you don't end up scrapping it is to not bite off more than you can chew. To speak from experience, I noticed that has been a reason I've given up on some paintings in the past. I tried something that was way out of my abilities and the work suffered to a point where I didn't feel like I could complete it. So, to prevent that from happening, make sure you're not trying something too ambitious, and maybe try to stick to ideas that are just barely at the edge of your comfort zone and work your way up to those grander, more complex ideas as you grow your skills. Start small to make your pieces more manageable. Another thing I find that helps me to move on from a painting that I'm really just not liking anymore is setting a timer. What I would do is, once I start feeling like I don't want to finish this painting or whatever I'm making, I set a timer for about, say, an hour or so. Then once that timer runs out, I stop what I'm doing and call the painting completed at that point, regardless of how it turns out. And in fact, sometimes after the timer ends, I may still find myself continuing to work on it. And that's also completely fine if you change your mind and decide that you want to push it further. Another thing you can do instead of setting a timer is maybe giving yourself a deadline to finish it. And after that point, you can move on to your next artwork. And this is especially useful if you find that you struggle getting into the flow of things, or if you have issues focusing on one thing for a certain period of time. Also, if you manage to push through and complete an artwork you weren't liking but you're still not happy with the final result, try not to judge it too much based on how it looks. You should really congratulate yourself because you completed what you started. Something that I want you to remember is that in this case, whatever the outcome might be isn't really what matters, and finishing the art is the important part. Because as I mentioned earlier, we want to practice the skill of completing our art. So what you should do in this instance is take some notes on what you did and what you want to maybe avoid doing in the future, and move on to the next work. Try not to let its appearance discourage you. So now that I've said all of this, I wanted to briefly touch on what you should do with all of your old, unfinished artwork. Even though I stress the importance of finishing your art, I don't really think it's necessary to go back and finish all of these scrapped works. I really just mean for you to apply this advice moving forward. But what you could do is maybe every once in a while, look through them and see which ones might have some potential. It's important to note that as you progress in your art journey and your skills develop further, you may either look back at these old scraps and cringe, or maybe you'll see some that you think you finally have the skill to tackle, or maybe you could reimagine them and make new art out of them. So, I guess the last thing I want to mention is that I don't want anyone to walk away from this video feeling pressured to finish everything they start, because realistically speaking, that's never going to happen. So what I want everyone to remember is that even though completing what you start is a good habit to have, it's also totally okay if you don't finish something. To be honest, it's rare that everything we start is even worth finishing. So it's okay to cut your losses sometimes. Just don't give up too early, because you never know when you'll suddenly be able to save a painting that you thought you were going to give up on. So keep trying, and hopefully you'll make more and more artistic discoveries that get you excited to keep working. And yeah, that's about all I have to say. Let me know in the comments if you have any additional advice on this topic, or if you have any ideas for topics you'd like to hear me talk about in future videos. If you found this video useful, don't forget to subscribe, if you feel inclined to, that is. And don't forget to join the Discord server if you haven't already. The link is in the description. We're nice people over there, I promise. Alright, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.